Alpha King Kale cast out his Barren Luna before the full moon. Before dawn, the sacred moonwolves brought their newborn cubs to her door. The great hall of the moonlit pack was filled with silence. Selene stood in the center of the stone floor, dressed in a simple white gown. The entire pack had gathered to witness her final judgment. For 5 years she had been the Luna of Alpha King Kale Blackthorn. For 5 years she had failed to give him an heir. Tonight that failure would cost her everything. Kale stood on the raised platform, tall and commanding in black and silver robes. His golden eyes were cold as they looked down at her. The scar across his left brow made him look even more severe. "Selene," he said, his voice echoing through the hall. "You have been my Luna for 5 years. The Fertility Council has waited 5 winters. The pack will not wait a 6th. You have given us neither strength nor an heir." Beneath his ribs, his wolf struck once against his chest. Kale's jaw tightened, but he forced the feeling down. Lady Seraphine stood near the platform, beautiful and composed. In her hands she already held the silver fertility crown that would be placed on the next Luna before dawn. Selene kept her head high. She did not cry. She did not beg. She simply stood there, her hands clasped in front of her. Kale continued, "From this night forward, you are no longer Luna. You will leave the pack lands by dawn." Selene finally spoke, her voice quiet but clear. "I have served this pack with everything I had. If my womb is barren, then so be it, but I will not be cast out like a criminal." Kale's jaw tightened further. "You will leave at dawn," he repeated. "That is my final word." The pack remained silent as Selene turned and walked out of the hall. No one stopped her. No one spoke in her defense. That night she packed what little she owned and walked to the small cottage at the edge of the packlands. She sat outside on the wooden steps and looked up at the full moon. She did not cry, but deep inside something old and quiet began to stir. As the moon reached its highest point, the sound of soft paws against earth reached her ears. Selene lifted her head. From the forest, several large wolves emerged. Their fur was silver-white, glowing faintly under the moonlight. These were moonwolves, sacred guardians of the pack. They moved slowly and with purpose. The lead wolf stopped in front of her and carefully placed a small whimpering cub at her feet. Then another wolf stepped forward and did the same. 5 tiny cubs lay at her feet, blind, fragile, and trembling. Their breathing was thin. Moonlight flickered weakly on their fur as if the light inside them was dying. Selene stared in shock. The lead moonwolf looked at her with ancient eyes, then lowered its head in respect before turning and disappearing back into the forest with the others. Selene slowly knelt down. She reached out and touched the first cub. The moment her fingers brushed its fur, the tiny crescent mark on the cub's forehead flared silver white. Its breathing steadied instantly. The weak moonlight on its fur grew brighter. One by one she touched the remaining cubs. Each time the crescent mark on their foreheads lit up, and their trembling stopped. No one had ever placed new life in her hands before. Selene gathered the cubs closer to her, her hands shaking. The woman they had called Barren was suddenly surrounded by breathing living proof. Above her, the full moon shone brighter than it had in years. In the main pack house, the silver fertility crown in Seraphine's hands cracked down the middle with a sharp sound. At the same moment, Alpha King Kale Blackthorn doubled over in his chambers as his wolf howled one word through his bones: "Mother." The 5 cubs stopped dying only when Selene kept her hands on them. She sat on the wooden floor of the small cottage, surrounded by the tiny moonwolves. Their breathing had steadied and the silver crescent marks on their foreheads glowed softly. Whenever she moved her hands away, their breathing grew thin again. So she stayed close, her palms resting gently on their small bodies. Selene tore strips from her own white gown and carefully wrapped the smallest cub against the cold. The fabric was thin, but it was all she had. The cub immediately pressed closer to her warmth. No one had ever placed new life in her hands before. For 5 years, the pack had measured her worth by what her body could not give. Tonight, sacred wolves had brought their cubs to her, cubs that had been dying until she touched them. She did not understand why, but she knew she would not let them die. In the main pack house, Alpha King Kale Blackthorn stood on the balcony, staring toward the edge of the packlands where Selene's cottage stood. A faint silver glow lingered in the air above the trees. His wolf struck his chest again. This time Kale did not force it down. He reached for his cloak. In the great hall, Lady Seraphine stared at the cracked silver fertility crown in her hands. The metal had split cleanly down the middle. She ran her fingers along the fracture, her expression cold and calculating. "Send 2 guards to the cottage," she said to the servant beside her. "If the former Luna is hiding something, bring it to me before the king sees it." The servant bowed and hurried away. Seraphine continued staring at the broken crown. The symbol of her future had shattered before she even had the chance to wear it. She would not let this humiliation stand. Above the great hall, the old lunar bell rang once by itself. In Seraphine's hands, the broken fertility crown split into 2 pieces, and every wolf in the moonlit pack turned towards Selene's cottage. The 5 cubs stopped dying only when Selene kept her hands on them. She sat on the wooden floor of the small cottage surrounded by the tiny moon wolves. Their breathing had become steady, and the silver crescent marks on their foreheads glowed softly. For 5 years the pack had called her Barren. Now 5 fragile lives were breathing because she refused to let go. Selene tore another strip from her white gown and carefully wrapped the smallest cub against the cold. The cub immediately pressed closer to her warmth. A sound reached her ears, multiple sets of footsteps moving quickly through the trees toward the cottage. Selene gathered the cubs closer, wrapping the torn fabric around them like a shield. She stood up slowly. As the door creaked open, 4 figures entered, 2 guards and 2 members of the Fertility Council. The lead guard stepped forward. "Lady Seraphine says the cubs belong to the next Luna," he said. "We are ordered to bring them back." One of the older council members looked at the glowing cubs and spoke quietly. "Only a true Luna can keep moonborn cubs breathing." The lead guard reached out. One of the council members extended his hand toward the smallest cub. The moment his fingers brushed its fur, the crescent mark on the cub's forehead dimmed sharply. The tiny body convulsed, and a thin, painful cry escaped its throat. Selene moved instantly. She pulled the cub back against her chest, her voice low but sharp. "Touch them again," she said, "and you can explain to the moon why its cubs died in your hands." The council member froze. The lead guard took a small step back. The older councilman stared at Selene, his face pale. "These cubs should not even be alive," he said quietly. "They were never meant to survive without a true Luna. If they die in our hands now, the moon will judge the whole pack for it." The guards looked at each other. None of them moved forward again. At that moment, a deep, powerful howl cut through the night. It came from the direction of the pack house. It was Kale's wolf. The sound was raw and commanding, rolling across the packlands like a wave. Every wolf in the moonlit pack turned toward Selene's cottage. Inside the cottage, the cubs whimpered and pressed closer to Selene. The silver marks on their foreheads flared brighter. The lead guard swallowed hard. We will report this," he muttered. Without another word, the group turned and left the cottage, moving quickly back toward the pack house. Selene stood in the doorway holding the cubs against her chest. Her heart was pounding, but she did not move. She had protected them, and something, or someone, had answered. Far away in the pack house, Alpha King Kale stood on the balcony, his chest rising and falling heavily. His wolf had howled without his permission. The word "mother" still echoed inside him louder than before. He could feel it now, a clear pull coming from the direction of Selene's cottage. His wolf struck his chest again. This time Kale did not force it down. He turned from the balcony and left his chambers without calling for guards. Behind his ribs, his wolf sent one command through the pack bond: protect. The forest path to the edge of the pack lands felt longer than it ever had. Alpha King Kale moved through the trees alone, his cloak pulled tight against the night chill. His wolf had not stopped pushing against his ribs since the howl. Every step brought him closer to the small cottage where he had sent Selene after casting her out. He told himself he was only going to check on the situation, to make sure Mayron's men had not caused more trouble. But deep down he knew that was a lie. His wolf was no longer asking. It was demanding. As he approached the clearing, he saw the faint silver glow coming from inside the cottage. The door was open. 2 guards and members of the Fertility Council stood a short distance away, looking uncertain and uneasy. Kale stepped into the open. The guards straightened immediately. The council members bowed, but their faces were pale. One of the councilmen spoke first. "Your Majesty, the former Luna. She has moonwolf cubs. 5 of them. They were dying when they arrived. Now they breathe only because she touches them." Kale's golden eyes narrowed. He walked past the men without a word and stopped at the doorway. Selene stood inside, the 5 tiny cubs nestled against her chest and in the torn fabric of her gown. The silver crescent marks on their foreheads glowed softly. When she saw him, she did not flinch. She held the cubs closer, her posture protective. Kale's breath caught. His wolf slammed against his ribs so hard it nearly brought him to his knees. "Protect." The command rang through him like a bell. Selene's voice was quiet but steady. "They were brought to me by the moon wolves," she said. "They were dying. If your people take them now, they will die again." Kale looked at the tiny lives in her arms. He had cast her out for being unable to give him an heir. And now, sacred cubs. Cubs that should not even exist outside the deepest parts of the forest were clinging to her, as if she were their only hope. He stepped inside the cottage. The guards and council members remained outside, too afraid to follow. Kale stopped a few paces away from Selene. His golden eyes moved from the cubs to her face. "I did not know," he said, his voice rough. "I did not know this would happen when I sent you away." Selene looked at him. There was no anger in her eyes, only a deep, quiet exhaustion. "You did what the pack demanded," she replied. "You did what you believed was right for the throne." Kale's wolf howled again inside him, softer this time, but insistent. "Protect." He reached out slowly and touched one of the cubs with the back of his fingers. The tiny creature did not pull away. Its crescent mark glowed a little brighter at his touch. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Kale lowered his hand. "You will not be taken back to the pack house tonight," he said, "and these cubs will stay with you." He turned toward the doorway and spoke to the waiting men. "Return to the pack house. Tell Lady Seraphine that I will handle this matter personally. No one is to come here without my direct order." The guards bowed and left quickly. The council members followed, casting nervous glances back at the glowing cubs. When they were gone, Kale turned back to Selene. His voice was quieter now. "I do not understand what is happening," he admitted. "But my wolf, it has not stopped calling for you since I cast you out." Selene looked down at the cubs in her arms. "Neither have they," she said. Outside the cottage, the forest was still. But in the distance, the old lunar bell in the great hall rang once more, slow, deep, and clear. And somewhere deep in the pack, Land's Lady Seraphine stood alone in her chambers, staring at the 2 broken pieces of the silver fertility crown. Her hands clenched into fists. This was not over. The first light of dawn touched the edge of the forest. Selene remained on the floor of the cottage, the 5 moonwolf cubs sleeping peacefully against her. Their silver crescent marks had dimmed to a soft glow, but they stayed bright enough to cast gentle light across the small room. She had not moved since the guards left. Her arms ached from holding them, but she refused to let go. Kale stood in the doorway watching her in silence. He had not left. After sending the others away, he had remained leaning against the wooden frame, as if guarding the threshold himself. His golden eyes moved between Selene and the tiny cubs. The powerful Alpha King, who had cast her out hours earlier, now looked uncertain, almost lost. "My wolf has not stopped calling for you," he said finally, his voice low. "It has never done that before, not for anyone." Selene looked up at him. Her eyes were tired, but there was a quiet strength in them that had not been there when she stood in the great hall. "Then perhaps your wolf knows something you do not," she replied. Kale stepped inside. He knelt a short distance away, careful not to startle the cubs. One of them stirred and made a small sound. Selene gently stroked its back, and it settled again. "I sent you away because the pack demanded an heir," Kale said. His voice was rough, as if the words cost him. "I believed I was doing what a king must do, but tonight, everything I believed is breaking apart." He reached out slowly and touched the edge of one cub's ear. The crescent mark flared brighter for a moment. "These cubs should not be alive without a true Luna," he continued. "And yet here they are, breathing because of you." Selene watched his face. "You are afraid," she said softly. It was not an accusation, only an observation. Kale did not deny it. "I am afraid of what this means," he admitted. "For the pack, for the throne, for me." Outside the cottage, the forest was beginning to wake. Birds called in the distance. The first rays of sunlight filtered through the trees. Kale stood up. "You will not stay here alone," he said. "I will bring you back to the pack house, under my protection. The cubs will come with you." Selene looked at him for a long moment. "And Lady Seraphine?" she asked. Kale's expression hardened. "She will learn her place." He extended his hand. Selene hesitated, then took it. He helped her to her feet, the cubs still nestled safely in the torn fabric against her chest. As they stepped out of the cottage together, Kale's wolf surged forward again inside him. This time he did not fight it. The pull was no longer something to silence. It was something to follow. In the main pack house, Lady Seraphine stood on the balcony overlooking the courtyard. She watched as Kale and Selene emerged from the forest path, the Alpha King walking protectively beside the woman he had cast out only hours earlier. 5 glowing cubs rested in Selene's arms. Seraphine's fingers tightened around the broken pieces of the silver fertility crown. She turned to the 2 trusted guards waiting behind her. "Prepare the Fertility Council," she said, her voice cold. "Tell them the former Luna has returned with forbidden cubs. We must act before the pack begins to question the king's judgment." The guards bowed and left. Seraphine looked back toward the path where Kale and Selene were walking. Her eyes narrowed. "If the moon wants to give her cubs," she whispered, "then we will take them from her." In the distance, the old Luna bell rang again, slow, deep, and insistent. The pack was waking up, and the real battle had only just begun. The walk back to the pack house felt like crossing a battlefield. Kyle walked beside Selene, his presence a silent shield. The 5 moon-wolf cubs remained nestled against her chest, their silver crescent marks glowing faintly with every step she took. The pack members who saw them stopped in their tracks. Whispers spread like wildfire. Some looked at Selene with awe, others with fear. Lady Seraphine waited for them in the great hall, flanked by the Fertility Council and a group of loyal guards. The silver fertility crown, now cracked in 2, lay on the table before her like a broken accusation. When Selene entered with the cubs, the entire hall fell into stunned silence. Seraphine's eyes narrowed at the sight of the glowing cubs. "These creatures do not belong to her," she said, her voice sharp and clear. "The former Luna was cast out for being barren. She has no right to claim sacred moon-wolf cubs. They belong to the next Luna, to the one who can actually give this pack an heir." Kael's golden eyes turned cold. "Enough, Seraphine," he said. His voice carried the full weight of his authority. These cubs were brought to Selene by the moon-wolves themselves. They were dying. She saved them. One of the older council members stepped forward, his face pale. "Your Majesty, only a true Luna can keep moon-born cubs alive. This is not natural." Selene looked at the councilman, then at Seraphine. She gently lowered one of the cubs so the hall could see it clearly. The tiny creature whimpered once, but when Selene placed her palm on its back, the crescent mark flared bright silver, and the cub settled. The entire hall drew in a collective breath. Seraphine's hands clenched into fists. "This is a trick," she hissed. "She has bewitched them. She is using forbidden magic to undermine the throne." Cale took a step forward, placing himself between Selene and the council. "I have seen enough," he said. "Selene will remain under my protection. The cubs stay with her. Any hand raised against them will answer to me." Seraphine's face twisted with barely contained rage. "You would choose a barren woman and her cursed cubs over the future of the pack?" she challenged. Cale's wolf surged forward again, stronger than before. He felt the command echo through his bones. "Protect." He looked at Selene, then back at the council. "I choose what the moon has already chosen," he said. "Selene is no longer the former Luna. She is under my direct protection, and these cubs are proof that the old ways are changing." The hall erupted into murmurs. Some council members looked uneasy. Others looked at Selene with new eyes, a mixture of fear and reverence. Seraphine stepped back, her expression cold. "As you command, Your Majesty," she said, but her voice carried a dangerous edge. "But the pack will remember this day." She turned and left the hall, her loyal guards following closely. Cale watched her go, then turned to Selene. "You should rest," he said quietly. "I will have rooms prepared for you and the cubs in the east wing." Selene looked at him, the glowing cubs still in her arms. "Thank you," she said. "But I will not hide. If the pack wants to judge me, let them see me clearly." Cale studied her for a long moment. Something shifted in his golden eyes. Respect, protectiveness, and the first sparks of something deeper. "Then stay by my side," he said. As they left the great hall together, the old lunar bell rang once more, slow and resonant. The pack was watching, and the true test of their new bond had only just begun. The east wing of the pack house had been quiet for years. Now it was filled with the soft sounds of 5 tiny cubs breathing. Selene sat on the wide bed surrounded by the moonwolf cubs. They had been given a large, soft nest made from the finest furs. The silver crescent marks on their foreheads glowed gently in the dim light. Whenever one of them whimpered, Selene placed her hand on it, and the sound stopped immediately. She had not slept. Cale stood by the window watching her. He had not left since bringing her here. His golden eyes moved between Selene and the cubs with a mixture of awe and deep conflict. "You should rest," he said quietly. Selene shook her head. "If I sleep, they grow restless. They only calm when I touch them." Cale walked closer and knelt beside the nest. One of the cubs stirred and crawled toward his hand. He let it sniff his fingers. The tiny crescent mark flared brighter for a moment. "My wolf has not stopped speaking since I cast you out," he admitted. "It calls you mother. It demands I protect you. I have never felt anything like this before." Selene looked at him. "And what do you want, Cale?" she asked. "Not your wolf? Not the pack? You." Cale was silent for a long time. "I want the pack to survive," he said finally. "But I'm beginning to understand that survival may not look the way I was taught." Outside, the room footsteps approached. Lady Seraphine entered without knocking, accompanied by 2 senior members of the Fertility Council. Her face was composed, but her eyes burned with barely contained fury. "The council has convened," she said. "We cannot ignore what is happening. These cubs are sacred. They belong to the pack, not to a woman who was cast out for being barren." Selene stood slowly, keeping one hand on the cubs. "They were dying when they came to me," she said. "The moonwolves chose me, not you." Seraphine smiled coldly. "The moonwolves are animals. They do not choose Lunas. The Fertility Council does." She gestured to the council members. "We have decided the cubs must be taken to the sacred nursery for proper care." The former Luna may remain under the king's protection, but the cubs belong to the pack. Kale stepped forward, his voice low and dangerous. You will not touch them. Seraphine's smile faltered for a second. Your Majesty, the law is clear. Sacred cubs must be raised by the council until a true Luna is confirmed. One of the cubs whimpered. Selene placed her hand on it, and the whimper stopped. The crescent mark glowed brighter. The two council members exchanged uneasy glances. Kale's wolf surged forward again. This time he let it show in his eyes. These cubs stay with Selene, he said. Any hand raised against her or them will be considered treason against the throne. Seraphine took a step back, but her expression remained defiant. As you command, she said, bowing slightly. But the pack will remember who chose a barren woman and her strange cubs over tradition. She turned and left the council members following quickly. The moment the door closed, Kale turned to Selene. They will not stop, he said. Seraphine has too many allies in the council. They will try to take the cubs another way. Selene looked down at the 5 tiny lives depending on her. Then we must show them the truth, she said, before they can twist it. Kale reached out and gently touched her arm. I will stand with you, he said, no matter what comes. Outside the east wing, Lady Seraphine walked down the corridor with purpose. She stopped at a hidden door and spoke to a waiting shadow. Prepare the old rite, she whispered. If the cubs will not leave her, then we will make the pack believe she is stealing their life force. The moon will judge her soon enough. The shadow bowed and disappeared. In the east wing, one of the cubs suddenly cried out in pain. Its crescent mark flickered weakly. Selene's scar flared hot. Something was already beginning to attack them from afar. The attack came without warning. One of the cubs suddenly cried out in pain, its small body convulsing. The silver crescent mark on its forehead flickered and began to dim. Selene felt the pain as if it were her own. Her burned scar flared hot, sending a sharp jolt up her arm. She dropped to her knees beside the nest, placing both hands on the struggling cub. Stay with me, she whispered, her voice trembling. Please stay. The other 4 cubs whimpered and pressed closer, their marks flickering in unison. The golden light from Selene's scar spread across their small bodies, but it was not enough. Something dark was pulling at them from afar. Kale was at her side in an instant. What is happening? He asked, his hand on her shoulder. Seraphine, Selene said through gritted teeth. She is using the old rite. I can feel it. She is trying to drain their life force to prove I am stealing it. Kale's golden eyes darkened with fury. He stood up and moved toward the door. I will end this. No, Selene said. She looked up at him, her face pale but determined. If you go alone, they will say you are bewitched. We must face them together. Kale hesitated only a moment. Then he nodded. He helped her gather the cubs. Selene wrapped them carefully in the torn fabric of her gown, holding them against her chest. The 5 tiny hearts beat weakly against her. They walked together through the east wing toward the great hall. Varith, who had been resting outside the wing, rose and followed them like a living shadow. The dragon's golden eyes burned with protective rage. When they entered the great hall, the entire pack had gathered. Lady Seraphine stood at the center of the fertility council, a dark ritual crystal glowing in her hands. Blue-black energy pulsed from it, reaching toward Selene and the cubs like invisible threads. Seraphine smiled coldly. You see, she announced to the pack, the former Luna is draining the life from sacred moonwolf cubs. She is a danger to us all. The cub in Selene's arms whimpered again. Its crescent mark was fading fast. Selene stepped forward, her voice ringing through the hall. You are the one killing them, she said. You are using forbidden magic to prove a lie. She placed her glowing palm on the weakest cub. Golden light exploded from her scar. It met the dark threads from Seraphine's crystal and burned them away. The cub's breathing steadied. All 5 crescent marks flared bright silver. The entire hall gasped. Seraphine's face twisted with rage. This is impossible, she screamed. She is using dark power. Kael stepped beside Selene, his voice carrying the full authority of the Alpha King. No, he said. This is the Ash Bond. The old magic the Council tried to bury. Selene is no thief of life. She is its guardian. He looked at the pack. I was wrong to cast her out. I was wrong to listen to fear. Selene is my Luna. She is the true Luna. And these cubs are proof that the moon has already chosen. Vaerith roared behind them, the sound shaking the great hall. One by one, wolves in the crowd began to lower their heads. First the younger ones, then the elders. The sacred moon wolves outside the hall howled in response. Seraphine staggered back. The Fertility Council members looked at each other in fear and confusion. Kael turned to Selene. He knelt before her once more, this time not in front of the army but in front of his own pack. I choose you, he said. Not because the moon demands it, but because my wolf, my heart, and my kingdom need you. Selene looked down at him, tears in her eyes. She placed her free hand on his shoulder. I accept, she said, not as a replacement, but as your equal. The golden light from her scar spread throughout the hall. The broken silver fertility crown on the table mended itself with a soft ring of sound. Seraphine screamed in fury and tried to flee. Vaerith moved faster. The dragon blocked the exit, its golden eyes fixed on her. The final judgment had begun. The great hall had never been so silent. Seraphine stood frozen as Vaerith blocked the exit, the dragon's golden eyes burning with ancient judgment. The 5 moonwolf cubs in Selene's arms had stopped whimpering. Their crescent marks glowed steady and strong, as if drawing power from the woman holding them. Kael rose from where he had knelt. He stood beside Selene, shoulder to shoulder, his presence, no longer that of a king judging his former Luna, but of a man standing with his chosen mate. The Fertility Council has served this pack for generations, he said, his voice carrying through the hall. But tonight you have used forbidden rites to attack sacred cubs and the woman the moon has chosen. That ends now. One of the older council members stepped forward, his face pale. Your Majesty, the old laws are clear. A Luna who cannot bear an heir must be replaced. This woman has brought chaos. Selene looked at him calmly. She gently adjusted one of the cubs in her arms. The tiny creature nuzzled closer, its crescent mark flaring bright. These cubs were dying when the moonwolves brought them to me, she said. They live because I touched them. If that makes me a threat, then the moon itself is a threat to your power. The hall murmured. Some wolves lowered their heads. Others looked at Seraphine with growing doubt. Seraphine's face twisted with rage. She is stealing life force, she shouted. She is no Luna. She is a parasite. She raised her hand. A final burst of dark blue energy shot toward Selene and the cubs. Vaerith roared and moved with blinding speed. The dragon's massive wing swept the dark energy aside, shattering it into harmless sparks. At the same moment, golden light exploded from Selene's scar. It met Seraphine's attack and consumed it completely. The silver fertility crown on the table shattered into pieces once more. This time the fragments turned to dust. Seraphine staggered back, her face drained of color. Kael stepped forward, his voice ringing with final authority. Lady Seraphine, you are hereby stripped of all titles and banished from the moonlit pack. The Fertility Council will be dissolved until new members loyal to the true bond can be chosen. He turned to the entire pack. Selene is my Luna. She is the true Luna. The moonwolves have chosen her. The cubs have chosen her. And I choose her, not because the pack demands an heir, but because she is the heart this pack has been missing. He knelt before her again, this time not in private, but before the entire hall. The pack watched in stunned silence. Then one by one they began to kneel, first the younger wolves, then the elders, until the entire great hall was on its knees before Selene and the 5 glowing cubs in her arms. Selene looked down at Kael, tears in her eyes. Rise, my king, she said softly. We will rule together." Kale stood and pulled her into his arms. He kissed her in front of the entire pack, a kiss filled with regret, redemption, and the beginning of something deep and true. Golden and silver light filled the hall as the ash bond, the true moon bond, awakened fully. Varith lifted its head and roared in triumph. The old era of fear had ended. A new one had begun. The full moon hung high over the moonlit packlands, bathing everything in silver light. In the great hall, the pack stood in reverent silence as Alpha King Kale publicly named Selene his Luna once more. Not as a replacement, not as a political necessity, but as the true Luna the moon wolves themselves had chosen. The 5 sacred cubs rested peacefully in a nest of soft furs beside her, their crescent marks glowing steadily. Kale took Selene's hand and spoke so every wolf in the hall could hear. "I cast out the woman the moon had chosen because I listened to fear," he said. "Tonight I choose her again. Not because the pack demands an heir, but because she is the heart this pack has been missing. She is the Mother Luna, and I am honored to stand beside her." He knelt before her one final time. Selene looked down at him, tears shining in her eyes. She placed her hand on his shoulder, the burn scar on her palm glowing softly. "I accept you," she said, her voice clear and strong. "Not as a king who needs an heir, but as the man who chose truth when everything pushed him toward fear. We will lead this pack together." Kale rose and pulled her into his arms. He kissed her deeply in front of the entire pack, a kiss filled with hard-earned redemption, quiet devotion, and the beginning of a love that had survived rejection, humiliation, and ancient magic. Golden and silver light exploded outward from them, spreading through the hall and across the packlands. The old lunar bell rang on its own deep and resonant. The moon wolves howled from the forest, their voices joining in a chorus of triumph. In the months that followed, the moonlit pack transformed. The old laws that measured a Luna only by the heirs she could produce were rewritten. The Fertility Council was dissolved and replaced by a new council that honored the ancient bonds. Moonwolf cubs thrived under Selene's care, and more sacred wolves began appearing from the deep forests drawn by the awakened true Luna. Kyle ruled with a balance of strength and compassion he had never known before. His wolf was finally at peace. One quiet spring evening, Selene and Kale stood together on the highest balcony, overlooking the blooming packlands. Varith, who had chosen to stay near the pack after the events at the temple, rested on the cliffs below, watching over them. Kale wrapped his arms around Selene from behind his hand, resting gently over her slightly rounded belly. "Our child will never know what it means to be measured by what they can give," he murmured. "They will grow up, knowing they are loved for who they are." Selene smiled and leaned back against him. "And they will know that even those the pack once called Barren can become the mother of new life," she whispered. "Not just of cubs, but of hope." The 5 moonwolf cubs, now strong and playful, tumbled around their feet, their crescent marks glowing softly in the moonlight. The woman the pack had cast out as Barren had become its heart and savior. Their love was not born of perfect circumstances. It was forged in public humiliation, broken crowns, dying cubs, and the courage to choose truth over tradition. It was a love that taught an Alpha King that true strength lies not in control, but in protection, trust, and the willingness to kneel before what is right. And in the heart of the moonlit pack, a strong, steady flame burned bright, one that would never be allowed to die again.